Good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of Young Lives India, I extend a very warm welcome to our eminent panelists and the participants. We express our gratitude to all of you for taking out time on a weekend to participate in this webinar. It is actually a testament to your commitment to further the education of our young citizens. We also acknowledge the breadth of the education sector present with us, including representatives from government departments, UN agencies, academics, INGOs, NGOs, and other experts. We look forward to sharing with you our journey from the Young Lives Survey of Head Teachers. Our discussants for today will also share their thoughts on the implications of these findings for educational policies and programs. We will end the webinar with questions and answers. You can type your questions in the chat during the sessions as well to be addressed by the panelist. You can click to the panelist option from the drop-down menu, and you can type your questions and the panelists would surely answer them. I wish you a very happy sharing experience. I would like to welcome our chair, Professor Senapati. Thank you, sir, for taking out time to be with us. Dr. Rishikesh Senapati is the Director NCERT under the Ministry of Education, Government of India. He has more than 25 years of experience of teaching, research, and extension activities. He has served as Head, Department of Extension Education and Department of Education, RIE Bhubaneswar, and as the Principal of the RIE Bhopal. Dr. Senapati has published a number of research papers on constructivist pedagogy, integrating ICT with constructivist pedagogy, teacher education in a new paradigm of learning, and has presented papers on teacher education, elementary education, and educational technology in national and international conferences. He holds an MA, MPhil, and PhD in education. Welcome, sir. It is an honor to have you with us here. I now introduce the co-chair, Professor Revati. Professor Revati is the Principal Investigator for Young Lives India and the Director of the Center for Economic and Social Studies, Hyderabad. Professor Revati is a development economist and has attained her MPhil and PhD degrees from Kakatiya University, Warangal. Before joining SAIS Hyderabad, she was a faculty member in the Department of Economics, Kakatiya University, and was also a senior fellow at ICSSR during 2010 to 12. She has also served as a member for the Curriculum for Economics, constituted by the Telangana State Public Services Commission in 2015. She has also been an active contributor in several forums at state and national level, which contributed to the case of the Telangana state. Thank you, ma'am, for being with us today. Dr. Renu Singh, Executive Director, Young Lives India, will be presenting the evidence from the Young Lives COVID-19 Survey of Head Teachers. Dr. Renu Singh is founder of Young Lives India and is also the country director for Young Lives, University of Oxford, a 4-country longitudinal study on childhood poverty. She has over 27 years of experience in educational management, teacher education, policy analysis, and research, both in India and abroad. She conceptualized and set up the Center for Early Childhood Development and Research at Jamia Millia University, and also the School of Rehabilitation Sciences in Delhi University. She has been a member of several committees and working groups constituted by the Government of India. A trained educational psychologist, Montessorian, and special educator. She's a prolific writer and has over 100 publications to her credit. Ma'am, we look forward to deepen our learning about education of children in the current COVID context. We are also joined by Professor Rashmi Diwan and Mr. Terry Dernian as discussants. Dr. Rashmi Diwan is professor at the National Institute of Educational Planning and Administration, New Delhi. Currently, she is the head, National Center for School Leadership, established at NIPA under the aegis of Ministry of Education. As an ardent researcher for the past 37 years, the spectrum of her work centers around the critical areas of school education, school management, and leadership. She has several national and international publications to her credit. Welcome, ma'am. Mr. Terry Durnian is the Chief of Education, UNICEF India. Before joining the India office in 2019, Mr. Durnian was working with UNICEF Nigeria. He worked there for 5 years. Prior to that, he served as the Chief Learning for Development at UNICEF State of Palestine. Before joining UNICEF, he was the Regional Education Advisor for Save the Children in Bangkok. He wrote one of the first books on multilingual education in Bangladesh. He's an educationist with over 30 years of experience in Canada, the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. Welcome, Mr. Durnian. I'm so excited to have this esteemed panel. I now invite our chair, Dr. Senapati, to please release the policy brief, Are Schools in India Ready to Support Students During COVID-19? Sir, please. Thank you, sir. May I now request you to kindly address our participants and open the technical session.
Thank you. This is a very good opportunity for me to share my experience with you. I think today we are discussing something relating to this National Education Policy 2020. The panelists are present here. I think Professor Rasmi Diwan, Mr. Perry, and Madam Renu Singh and others. I'm very happy that you have given me this opportunity. And this just I was asked to say something about this policy, national policy on education 2020, because we are dealing with school education and NCERT, the apex body, all of us know, and we are working for the children of this country, and particularly their education, and we should provide quality education to our children. And the policy which has been released in July this year is putting a lot of emphasis on experiential learning. It is though that you'll find that the structure 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 structure is there, 15 years of school education. Earlier it was 10 plus 2. And you'll find a lot of focus is on early childhood education and care, because that is the foundation. And if the foundation is strong, then definitely we can take advantage of it, because maximum brain development takes during this period. And the second feature, you'll find this vocational education. We are going to start from class 6, and that is also another milestone, because we want to develop the skills and competency. India is a country that it is going to be the youngest country in the world, and we should take advantage of this demographic dividend. And by introducing vocational education from class 6 and integrating with the mainstream education, definitely we are going to bring about change in the entire system of education, and it will definitely help in skill development and also promote dignity of labor. And in secondary stage, we are going to give a lot of freedom to our children. They can select subject as per their choice, as per their interest, as per their aptitude. There will be no hard separation, lot of flexibility. Focus is on holistic development, and our focus is on more on multilingualism. So if you see the policy, vision of the policy, what exactly we want our children to be connected to their roots, and also we should develop global citizenship education. If you see the Indian philosophy, in Indian philosophy we say Vasudeva Kutumbakam, whole world is one family. And this is also now we are talking of this global citizenship education, and that is why in our policy it is there that Indian ethos and our tradition, our value system, our culture should be reflected, and our children should understand that. Along with that, also we should move towards the global citizenship. That is the main focus, and purpose is to develop a very equitable, vibrant, knowledge society, and that is the main focus of this policy. And it is very inclusive in nature, that all of us know we are going to take care of all the children. When I say all the children, children who are coming from rural area, from remote tribal area, and even the Divyang children, and all the children, and this preschool education, the foundational stage is going to take care of that, and that is why government of India is going to spend 6% of GDP on education. And if you see the policy from a holistic point of view, that we say this is holistic in nature, because we are putting a lot of emphasis in the development of all the dimensions, not only cognitive, on ethical, that means on moral, emotional, social, that means all other disposition, all the other aspects of the personality. That is why we say this is a holistic in nature. And what you'll find, you won't find much change in physical structure. You'll find change in curriculum, change in pedagogy, and change in assessment. From the if you go through the policy, because I now think policy, everybody has gone through the policy, and if we critically examine them, what we have to do, we have to bring about reform in curriculum. That is most important. For the first time, this policy has recommended that we should develop 4 national curriculum framework, and now we are going to develop 4 national curriculum framework. That is one curriculum framework for early childhood education and care, another curriculum framework for school education, and curriculum framework for adult education. First time we are going to develop a curriculum framework for adult education. We have to take care of the illiterate people, and we have to develop their skills and competencies so that they can have better quality of life, and they can enjoy their life. So that is also another aspect. And the teacher education curriculum framework for teacher education, NCT will develop, NCT will provide academic support. So these curriculum frameworks are real, will give us the roadmap, and accordingly we can develop our textbook and the syllabus, and it will bring about a significant change. And if you see the pedagogical aspect, that means this policy put a lot of emphasis on experiential learning. The pedagogical reform, what exactly we want our children to develop the basic competency. We are in 21st century. All the 21st century skills should develop. Our children should develop their critical thinking, problem solving ability, communication skills, and also their creativity. For this, what we need, what type of environment we have to create, we have to provide them experience, we have to provide them exposure, variety of experiences. And that is why policy has recommended that should be art integrated learning, that should be sport integrated learning, that should be ICT integrated learning, that should be story based learning. So that means, and that should be bagless day, so that student can visit different places, they can have some experience. And really this policy has recommended a lot of change, that there are a lot of reform, and that we have to implement, and so that we can bring about change in the entire system of education. And the third thing, that assessment, that is the most important thing the policy has recommended, that if really you want change, then we have to bring about change in the process of assessment. It is the assessment that really can bring about change. That is why if you see in the policy has recommended 360-degree assessment. 360-degree assessment, that is the holistic assessment, and assessment will be transparent, and all our students will be involved in the process of assessment. And if you see the policy, there are 3 modes. Policy is also talking about 3 modes of assessment: assessment of learning, assessment for learning, and assessment as learning. We all know, earlier we all are familiar with assessment of learning. We know that is a summative assessment. Assessment for learning, that is a formative assessment. But this time the policy is highlighting assessment as learning. That is most important. Assessment is an integral part of teaching learning, and it should be integrated with teaching learning. And our students should be involved in the process of assessment, and they will not feel that they are going to be assessed. And while they developing the rubrics, our students will be a part of it, and teacher and students together can develop to fix the criteria and develop the rubrics, and they can assess themselves. There will be self-assessment, there will be peer assessment, there will be assessment by the teacher, and parents also assess. You can assess. So that means we are going to make it more holistic. And if assessment is holistic, then definitely it will take care of everything. And we are going to develop holistic progress card, and this will be a milestone, because when this holistic progress card will be introduced in our school, that means our teachers will take care of all aspects, not only the logical mathematical intelligence. They will take care of the sport, they will take care of the music, they will take care of other extra, and there will be no hard separation, no extracurricular, no co-curricular, everything will be part of the curriculum. So all these things are there in this policy, and if this policy is implemented, then definitely it will bring about a change. And this is not only about the school education, this policy has also recommended a lot of change for the teacher education, because without bringing about change in teacher education, we cannot improve the quality of school education. That is, in school education, we have developed a learning outcome, defined learning outcome from class 1 to 10, and now we are defining learning outcome for class 11 and 12. So in the same way, we should also come out with the learning outcome for teacher education. And this policy has recommended the professional standard, and we have to develop that professional standard. Then we are going to have different types of program for this teacher education, 4-year integrated program, 2-year in B.Ed program will be there till 2030, and for those students who will be completing 3 years graduation, and 1-year B.Ed program for the students who will be completing 4-year graduation. So these things, these are the major recommendation of the policy, and we are going to take care of the adult education. In higher education also, lot of flexibility and multiple entry, multiple exit. So many things are there. So I am briefly just I would highlight that this policy is going to bring about a significant change in the entire system of education, not only in school education, in higher education. A lot of emphasis on research, and lot of emphasis on collaboration, for sharing, etc., and convergence, because we should not work in isolation, in silo. We should work together. And policy has emphasized that community participation, a lot of focus on community participation. If our community is not involved, if parents are not involved, then it will be very difficult for us to improve the quality of education. And that school complex, and there will be there local experts, local resources will be used. There will be a lot of sharing. So that from that point of view, we are going to take everybody with us to improve the quality of education. So that from that point of view, this policy will definitely help us to improve the quality of education. And I am very happy that Young Lives is conducting this program, and I got this opportunity. I know Madam Renu Singh discussed with me, and I agreed, and it is very good. And now I welcome you all, and all the panelists, and now you can share your experiences. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you very much, sir, for sharing the insights and highlighting the very, very vital points of the national education policy, including its holistic approach. Thank you so much. And I now request you and co-chair Professor Revati to kindly open the technical session and lead the scene. Thank you, sir. And Professor Revati, please.
Yes. Thank you, Amita, and good afternoon, all. And good afternoon, Senapati ji, who's the Director NCRT, Dr. Renu Singh, and panelists Rashmi and Terry, and all the participants here. I think, yes, we'll be having a presentation of the policy brief that has been completed recently by the Young Lives, where it was organized in the states of Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. Schools in India are ready to support students during the time of pandemic. So I think it concluded, and I request Dr. Renu Singh, who is the Country Director of Young Lives, to make the presentation, and then I will follow it up with some discussion. Thank you, Dr. Renusi.
Thank you, Professor Senapati, and thank you, Professor Revanthi. I think Professor Senapati has set the tone of, the saying that there is the new education policy is extremely aspirational. I think it's extremely ambitious as well, because it is almost like we need to bring a paradigm shift by, bringing in aspects of assessment by not just of children, but as he put it, that we're looking at assessment as learning, which is completely different from what we've been doing for so many years. And I think we all are looking really forward to seeing that all this change happen as we move forward. And I know NCERT and NIPA, both of whom are represented here. We have Professor Devan from NIPA, and I know they are all working on setting the curriculum frameworks in NCERT, while I know Professor Devan is working on school leadership, for example, and standards and other aspects of school leadership. So I think we're really fortunate, and thank you. We have Terry from UNICEF, and I know we're really fortunate to have all of you with us, and looking forward to the discussion, because Terry brings with him all the programmatic implications of what we are going to discuss today, which is so important, as well as looking at it from the policy perspective. So what I'm going to share is, in the backdrop of the pandemic, as we just heard from Professor Reddy, we did a small study in 83 schools, and both private and government. These were telephone interviews which our partner CES conducted under the leadership of Professor Revanthi and Dr. Reddy. And what we were able to understand is the perspective of head teachers. And I think that is really important, because if we want to really understand what is happening on the ground, we also have to hear what school leaders are saying. And we need to give credence to their voices. So these are really voices of head teachers. These were all telephonic interviews. And I'm going to tell you a little more about the findings that we did. The next one, please. So this is in the backdrop of the longitudinal study. As most of you may be aware, Young Lives has been following 3,000 children in each of the 4 countries, study countries, which are Ethiopia, India, Vietnam, and Peru, since 2002. We have a total of 12,000 children. And so now this is the 18th year of our study. This year we were supposed to go into the field and conduct the 6th round of survey. But because of the pandemic, we had to decide to do things over the telephone. So we've been doing more telephonic interviews and telephone surveys, and moved out of face-to-face surveys for this year. So what we've been doing is we've been working across, starting with United Andhra Pradesh, and of course after the bifurcation in both Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. So we're in 4 districts, which are Srikakulam, West Godavari, Kadapa, and Anantapur in Andhra Pradesh, and we're in Karimnagar, Mehboob-Nagar, and Hyderabad in Telangana. So these are the 7 districts that and we work at the mandal level, which are our sentinel sites. Can I go to the next one, please? Thank you. So as I was just mentioning to you, this is, in 2020, where instead of round 6, we did this phone survey. And we are right now doing the second call, which is, with these 3,000 children in India and 3,000 in each of the other countries. But as a sub-study, we have been actually running school surveys. So in 2016, if we go to the next slide, please. The next one, please. I'm just going to move forward because I know we've lost a lot of time. Just move forward. Yeah. So if you look at in 2016-17, we had run a secondary school survey in which we had actually gone to schools, both private and government, and not just interviewed teachers and principals, but also done cognitive achievement tests of students in the beginning of the academic year as well as the end of the academic year to look at value-added effects in these schools. As a follow-up to that, this year it was decided that we would actually go to these same schools, because we were already familiar with these head teachers in government and private schools in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, and understand how the pandemic has affected these schools and how the school leadership was actually responding to the support systems that were in place, also what they were trying to do, what were the challenges faced. So this is the kind of study that we did. So a total of 183 schools, both government and private. What we have done is we are clubbing the state government and the tribal social welfare schools together. So, and you know, there were 82 and 34 each. And we have 19 of private aided schools and 48 of private unaided schools, which we are calling private schools because of the management type that in terms of governance structures in these schools. So what we are going to present to you is findings from this particular phone survey that we did, talking to the head teachers and trying to understand the following. So what were we trying to look at? We wanted to look at what was the support offered to students and families during school closure. We also wanted to know what was the reach of the support, whether it was targeted at specific groups. Also, we wanted to know, was there any guidance that head teachers had received, because head teachers and school leadership themselves sometimes look towards other support systems. Also, what did they feel was the biggest challenge in terms of supporting learning of children, and the impacts that they expected as a result of the school closure, and what were their plans in terms of, you know, reopening schools, what were their fears, and what do they think was their biggest concerns at this point. So that those were the contours of our research questions. You have the next one. So moving to the key findings, you could see we asked these principals and head teachers whether there was any provision of support. So in terms of provision of support, I think almost everybody said, yes, we are trying to provide support for student learning in one way or the other. And you can see that, you know, most of them felt that they were trying to put provision of support in place. They were also saying, they were talking about provision of student well-being. 95% government school head teachers said that we are putting together provision of support, and private schools over 84%. Again, in terms of reaching out for parental support, you know, 77% government and private schools said they were trying to put together support systems. This is trying to put together, not what was happening. So let's see what they said in terms of, can we go to the next slide, please? In terms of who were they actually able to reach? And so if you look at it, you know, we've kind of divided it in terms of how many % of head teachers said, you know, they were only able to reach about a quarter of the students. And if you look at the last block on top, you know, for each the government and private, you can see 6% of government head teachers said that they were able to reach 100% of students and families, whereas it was 10% in private schools. In terms of, say, 3/4 to 99%, this was about 15% in government and 26% in private. Again, in terms of a little more than half and less than a quarter, or to a quarter, 75%, it was, you know, you can look at it at 23%, which is almost the same in both the schools. So the question was, 15% of government schools said they were able to reach out to only a quarter of the children, and 20% of private schools said that they were able to reach out to only a quarter of the students, which means there is still a lot to be done. So even though they are trying to put provisions in place, there are still gaps that exist. We go to the next slide, please. So we also asked them what are the different means of reaching out, you know, which they were trying to put together. And if you look at it, you know, we've got a lot of government school teachers, head teachers telling us that they're encouraging students to watch lessons on TV. Just remember, this is again Andhra Pradesh, Telangana alone. Yeah, this does not apply, and you cannot be generalized to the rest of the country. So because they were already, the government system, there was a, already they had put into place television shows for children, specifically targeting, teaching them lessons through television. So therefore, we found that almost 98% of the government head teachers said that, and whereas 81% in private schools said the same as well. Again, they were also encouraging students to watch lessons online. Which was close to almost 4 out of 5 head teachers said that in government schools, less teachers in private schools, interestingly. They were encouraging students to listen to lessons on radio, little more than half in government head teachers said that, and about a third, 37% in private schools said the same. Again, they were offering online, and this was again around 40% in government and 37% in private schools. Recorded lessons were even less. There were only 18% of the head teachers were offering recorded lessons in government, and compared to almost the same 22% in private. Can you go to the next one? So even though, so what you can see is an array, and there's a menu that that people are offering, governments as well as private are trying to reach students. But if you look at who are the students that they were feeling that who they really were reporting who needed targeted support, we're looking at 15% of head teachers said students with disabilities require it. But if you look at, they were concerned about these children, because if you look at students who will sit for exams next year, seems to be the most, I think, targeted group over here. Yeah. So, for example, we are looking at, weaker learners being the next section who are getting them. So 3/4 of the head teachers in government and almost the same in private were saying students who are sitting for exams. That means, obviously, you're looking at the board exam students getting the maximum attention at this point, followed by weaker learners. They said 10 students from poorest households. And they were also surprisingly, a third of them were concerned about the highest attaining learners as well. They didn't want to lose sight of those, and they said, we are worried, we are targeting them as well. Students with disabilities, only 9%, of all schools, with 15% private schools and 6% government schools actually saying that they were, they were really targeting students with disabilities. So that, but of course, we don't know how many they have. So this is based on what they were reporting. And all this is self-reported by the administrators who we interviewed. We go to the next one, please. So in terms of challenges that they were facing, I think this is, this is something we are getting from different quarters. Various reports are saying this. And again, you've got almost 97% of the government school head teachers saying students do not have the technology they need. And that is one of the biggest challenges that they're facing. And almost 3/4 of the head teachers of private schools also said the same. So, we have this, I think, understanding that private school children all probably have much more technology. There is a big gap there as well. Of course, it may be less of a challenge, but the challenge remains, because just remember, we have a pro-poor sample. We are not talking of the elite private schools, the very elite private schools. So because we have a pro-poor sample, we have a different array of kind of private schools that we are talking about. These are all secondary schools, so they all recognize that they're big schools in terms of size. They're not very small schools. Yet, they will, you can see the challenge remains even in these schools in terms of children not having the technology. Again, students' internet connection. So even if they had the technology, there was a smartphone in the house, they didn't, they felt, or if they had a tablet or something, they didn't have good internet connections. Communications were still very difficult. Again, limited student motivation was another big issue that came up. And the point is, what we are calling lack of student or limited student motivation, I wonder where that is stemming from. Because is it because children are unable to access the learning that is being offered to them. That could be very well, or are there other concerns in their household? And that is something that we didn't get answers for, of course. They also talked of limited parental support for learning. And again, this is, when you're looking at households who may have lost their livelihoods, but this is what was reported by the head teachers, where 43% of government head teachers and 45% of private head teachers reported this. Again, they also talked about not having necessary skills. So not only did students not have the technology, but they did not also have the internet facilities, nor did they have the skills to use the technology. And obviously they still felt that there were challenges in terms of having taught them these skills. They also talked about difficulties in delivering physical resources, because some of them were trying to, send them physical resources. And again, almost, 1 out of every 5 head teachers of government schools and 18% of private schools talked about difficulty in delivering physical resources. Staff also did not have good internet connections, with what head teachers told us, though the numbers are still very low, less than 10%. And they also talked of limited staff motivation, and as well as staff not having technology. But again, these were very small. All were less than 7 to 8%. We go to the next one. So we asked the head teachers, were they confident that they will be able to support students to catch up? And they were supposed to give us answers in terms of being very confident, or somewhat confident, or not confident at all. And you can see that 36% of government head teachers said they were very confident to support students to catch up in their learning, vis-a-vis 55%, which was a higher number of private head teachers. 60% of government teachers said, head teachers said they were somewhat confident that they would be able to support student learning, vis-a-vis 39% of private head teachers. In terms of their ability to support students' well-being, which we believe is even more important at this point of time, again, we had only 27% of government head teachers who said they were very confident, compared to 42% of private head teachers, and 55% of the government head teachers said they were somewhat confident, as compared to 39% of private head teachers. You go to the next one. So, the concern was that, okay, so if you're not going to be able to help them cope, which are the areas which are most likely to be impacted? So the learning areas that head teachers were most concerned about was actually maths. Maths came out as in terms of subject area, they were most concerned in private schools, especially, about maths, that, students may lose math skills if they're not, because they're not getting enough practice, they don't have face-to-face learning. So 43% of private head teachers were very concerned about students' mathematical skills being impacted, as compared to a quarter of the head teachers, close to 20, just 27% in government schools. Reading, 10% across the board. English proficiency was especially an area of concern for the government school head teachers. Very few in the private schools said that. And of course, when we are looking at, these head teachers were actually, when we asked them these questions, these were for secondary schools. So they talked about all students, right from, some of them, these schools were mainly schools from 8 to 10. Yeah, so they were talking about basically upper primary and secondary students. They were also talking about motivation for learning, which was impacted. So a third of the government head teachers were actually worried and saying, are we, and I think rightly so, that how are we going to motivate them and keep them motivated? I think that, which when we come to the next slide, it has obvious repercussions. So they were very concerned about motivation for learning. And of course, when you're looking at learning loss, the head teachers, when you're looking at specific groups of students that they were most concerned about with all the learning loss that we just mentioned, they were talking about students from poorest households as being their most important concern. And of course, again, like I said, ours is a pro-poor sample. Yeah, so we have to understand these are not very elite private schools we're talking about. And you can see this is, across both private and government schools, there was a very big concern about the students coming from poor households and worrying about their learning loss. Weak learners, again, was another very big concern across both schools, the head teachers, or followed by rural students particularly, then also highest attaining learners. Again, I said, very interestingly, there wasn't very much difference between boys and girls, where we thought people would probably turn around and talk more in terms of the girls being more impacted, but actually that did not happen. And of course, the other two target groups which they were concerned was about overage students and students with disabilities. I think Professor Senapati has to leave for another meeting. Can we just, I'd just like to just pause and thank you so much for coming. And we hope to continue our dialogue. I know you are extremely busy, and I thank you very much, sir. We'll continue our dialogue and we'll be in touch. Thank you, sir. Thank you. So students with disabilities, of course, were another concern, and overage students. I think the concern would obviously be that if there are overage students and there is pressure, especially girls, there might be other pressures on the household of dropping out. So I'll come to the next slide, which is quite evident from where their concerns are. So these were the students that they said were going to be most, in their opinion, were most at risk of dropping out. Students from the poorest households, not very surprising. Weak learners, then girls, boys, and then of course, you can see rural students as well as overage students. So I think the big worry is what is going to happen to students from the most vulnerable households, as well as students who are weak learners. How are they going to cope, and how can schools actually reach out and support them adequately? I think that was a big concern that school leaders were worried about. We have the next one, please. So in terms of, looking at the effect of the pandemic on teachers and head teachers themselves, 1 out of every 10 private school head teachers, was very confident that their school would survive. But that's a very small number. Less than 10% were very confident that their schools could survive the pandemic. A quarter of them were not at all confident. So that's, and close to half were only somewhat confident that they would be able to survive the economic impact of the pandemic. So this was one of their biggest worries. So in terms of the head teachers' priorities, of course, this doesn't apply to government schools because the head teachers didn't have to worry about the financial implications of the pandemic, but 24%, close to a quarter, said for financial sustainability is our biggest concern, and they were not at all confident that their schools would survive this pandemic. And of course, opening schools with precautions in place was the biggest priority for both government and private schools. And then helping the students feel confident about school reopening was the second important thing. These are all very important policy, I think, and programmatic implications, because what they're asking for is, tell us how to do this. And I think they're wanting this support. And I think SOPs are being discussed, are now going to be written, and guidelines are being put in place. But how do you also help students feel confident and their parents feel confident? I think that is also a very important piece of the whole guidelines that we need to be focusing on. We go to the next one, please. In terms of teacher working conditions, there was very worrisome data, because even though 85% of head teachers said that teachers were really providing academic and well-being support, only 10% of their staff were getting the usual salary is what came through. 67% of government and 39% of private school head teachers reported salaries being deferred. And of course, in the government, it was only deferral. They will be paid for sure. But private schools, 25% said that their teachers had not been paid at all. And that is a huge worry, going forward. So in terms of support extended to head teachers, and that's really important, when we're looking at, are they being supported? The private head teachers, 47% said no guidance had been provided from external bodies. while more than half, 54%, said we have a lot of freedom though in decision making. So we ourselves can make decisions. Whereas the government head teachers, less than a quarter, 23% said we have a lot of freedom, and 72% said that no guidance had been provided from external bodies. So I think even though they were getting guidelines, I think this is about actual support in hand-holding and being told how to do things. That is what this support was, this question was about. Have the next one, please. So I think I'm going to just quickly, put together, the top line headlines, because I think what is really coming through is that knowing that there is a huge digital divide in India, both urban and rural, also between, you're looking at households, better or well-off households and more vulnerable households. I think we will have to use a blended approach going forward to address the needs of the students, especially the ones who are belonging to disadvantaged households. Also, how can we replace, when we can't replace regular classes by distance learning, because I think that is something that is not going to happen. We'll need to find ways of actually using different means and different provisions so that we can use where we don't have the digital means, can we also provide them other means like we've heard about, where we can use the radio and we can use more other channels of reaching out to them. Also, I think no single model will work. So district action, keeping taking into account the digital infrastructure. I think that's really important, both digital infrastructure, because often there is no internet in many places. Also, how are we going to have the resources to be able to make sure that students are given the resources they need? I think that's the other thing. So we need to really take cognizance of this as we plan for the rollout of schools reopening. We also have to assess effectiveness of remote learning. So even those children who are able to access, distance learning, remote learning, we need to look at what are they learning, how much are they learning, because I think it's a highly dynamic situation and we need to really be measuring this. I don't know how much of this is happening. We go to the next one, please. And of course, I think the focus has to be on that last child. Dropouts, especially with the concerns of teachers not being paid. 25% of these private school head teachers saying that, they were worried about schools, closing down. There's going to be a huge exodus. We also know migrant children have moved, back to their villages and back to their original hometowns. There's going to be a huge exodus of children in government schools, and some government schools and metros may have less children, and then maybe children will drop out from private schools. But all this, I think there needs to be a tremendous amount of planning that needs to happen to make sure there's no disruption in these children's education. I would also worry about teachers' working condition, because I think it's imperative that both head teachers and teachers in government and private schools are paid on time. They are doing tremendous work in very exceptionally difficult circumstances, and I think they need to be provided suitable training. So in-service training needs to really look at how do we use blended approaches, how can we train teachers and support to transition to distance learning and blended approaches when they have to use it while schools remain shut. I know we are hoping schools will reopen in the near future, but I think there is still a lot that we need to do in this direction before we go back to, and the new normal will demand for us to really look into all this. Thank you very much. I just want to end with Mahatma Gandhi's words, which said, true education must correspond to the surrounding circumstances, or it is not a healthy growth. So I think we will have to adapt and we'll have to accommodate to this new normal as we roll out the new national policy as well as school reopening as well. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Renu. I think you have thrown light on the findings of the study, but let me raise few issues and then I think we'll open it for discussion by the two eminent discussants that are here. The study, this survey was done during July, August, and I think from September onwards, the schools were, in one way, they were opened actually in the 2 states. That teachers were coming to the schools, and then they started imparting lessons through some of these media recorded lessons, and then satellite TV, and then state TV and Doordarshan, which are free, and some of them are paid through cable network and all this. So I think it's very important here that the digital divide that Dr. Renu was raising, yes, even NSS also shows that what is the penetration of this penetration, and as well as technology that is there. And as it is evident, it's very low in the rural, and okay, moderate in the urban. It shows that rural it's 13% and urban it's a little bit higher. And even then, I think other studies also have been showing this, like teachers federation bodies also have been doing some of these studies in both the states, also collecting some of the data from different schools. One survey in Telangana, which has done in 1868 villages, in all 33 districts, said that there are a lack of infrastructure for online classes in rural areas. And even TV sets, television sets in public schools, that's the government schools, are also not there in all of them, and also not in working conditions. So if lessons are broadcasted through televisions also, that would be, how many would be watching those would be, is a question that's there. And also because of the low bandwidth that's there in the rural areas especially, so where they are unable to access, and then the internet penetration is also very low. And after September, I think actually, the school education department also said that 80% of the school students have been coming into or getting access into these different modes, especially watching the TV and all. But I think that's again, one should be a little bit wary about what's the percentage of students who are able to access these schools. So I think it changed a little bit, like the TSAT Vidya portal and Nipuna portal, these have started the digital channels and imparting these classes, recorded classes. Also, I want to just throw light on some of the kind of ways that were adopted, especially by Telangana Social Welfare Residential Education Institution Society. I think as Dr. Renu also was saying that the blended, they're already into it. Like they've started like village learning circles in the villages where their volunteers are there, and they have tried to mobilize children in small groups, and also try to take lead in kind of explaining them or helping them out in following the lessons. So these kind of initiatives also have been happening, where it actually had a lot of good response. There were like 5,800, 12,700, sorry, 24 village learning circles have been started, covering, I think, around 6,000 students. So I think that's the kind of initiatives that have been also happening. So this is one initiative that is there. And the other issues are that the effectiveness of digital learning, of course, yes, it is, many studies are yet to, we are yet to see how effective they are. And the teachers, of course, yes, the private school teachers are the vulnerable, most vulnerable, where I think most of the, we have been hearing reports that private school teachers without pay, they are also getting into different kinds of activities. And then most of them do not know whether their school would survive this pandemic fact, whether the school would be there even after overcoming this kind of crisis, and how to kind of face this kind of situation. So these are some of the issues that are there. And then, yes, the findings have come out that there should be, what are the ways and approaches that schools should be following. And because I think we are seeing that this situation may continue also to some extent of time, and then how we should be overcoming this, and actually how the students should be able to cope up with this, and the teachers, and without losing much of the teaching learning process, without damaging the kind of teaching learning process. I think I'll stop at this, and then I'll invite Dr. Rashmi, who will be focusing more on the policy aspects. And thank you. Over to Rashmi.
Thank you. Thank you very much. At the outset, I would like to congratulate the team, Young Lives India, for coming up with such, interesting study. And there have been studies quite limited during this time when this COVID-19, pandemic announced the school closure all over India. So I would like to congratulate the team for the release of this, policy brief, and also completion of this study, the field survey. And for me, it was very interesting to note that the title of this report said interrupted education in India. So that was something very fascinating, So because it had caught the analytical eye of a small researcher like me, but you can understand how the policy, policy decision makers would take it, That's such a wonderful approach. And I would like to congratulate you all. Thank you for making me part of this, August gathering here, and on this special day when your policy, brief was officially released. And I'm very much honored to be here with you all. Thank you for all the invite, and also considering me as one of your family. Thank you. I would also, I think you all will agree with me that closure of all the schools brought with it the immediate concern on how to ensure continuity of learning, because it had affected almost 1.5 billion children globally and 240 million children in India, those children who were already enrolled in the schools. So today, when we see those children, we do not know how many of them had access to online, teaching. And this was the time when only alternative to combat this sudden, interrupted learning that, that looked more feasible was teacher-led virtual classrooms. So in this changing scenario, teachers, the head teachers, parents, they were all left, at the crossroads, conventional teaching and now the online mode of teaching, for which there was either limited, preparation, or there was no preparation. So NEPA also conducted a survey, but this was done on the teachers of higher education institutions. And it estimated that roughly 70% teachers had very low capacity to offer online courses. Despite that, we have SWAYAM today, we have, Diksha portal and many other, e-Pathshala and all, but still, the limitations of teachers are still very, very, serious about, this thing. So the struggle for teachers was much more even than the head teachers, because they were just like frontline warriors, managing the classes online. And then, they did not have access to the library, no laboratories, and then reading material was not there with them, no resource, material available, and also the teaching, the learning materials for children also. So here, it was a big, challenge for them to keep children engaged in the online mode as in depth as they could have been in classroom settings. So if we comment on the quality of knowledge transmission, there's a big, question mark there, because we can always say now, though we don't have studies on this, but of course now it's there, young lives. Thank you very much. But we must say that children were mainly, those who had access to online, any kind of device, but they were mainly, experimented online, I would say. And then there were several initiatives taken up by different, states in the country, and just to ensure that the continuity in learning happens. But somehow, I think the expectations from the school teachers and head teachers was, a utopia. It was very difficult to achieve those, to come up to those expectations. And to which, Professor Revati was also mentioning just now, that though there has been some, initiatives, but somehow, there were roadblocks as well, some barriers also, and the challenges that were faced by all our stakeholders. So, but there was also some kind of preparation happening, the moment this school closure got announced. Everyday circulars, instructions, SOPs, guidelines for the schools, the document entitled, Pragyata by Department of School Education and Literacy, Ministry of Education, which offered guidelines for digital education for a diverse set of school, stakeholders, including school heads, teachers, parents, teacher educators, and students. But then where there was no accessibility, there was no proper infrastructure, what would these support, material do for the these guidelines would do for the head teachers? You can always imagine, because you have been in the field for a long time. So, but NCERT also took different kinds of initiatives, by providing counseling services for students, alternative academic calendar, and students' learning enhancement guidelines, with a focus on learning outcome in order to fill the gaps or loss of learning among students. And these concerted efforts did, I would say, push the states to initiate some of the innovative practices to ensure continuity in teaching learning, but of course following the norms of social distance in places where there was no possibility of reaching online. So we have those kinds of best practices available on. We have been hearing about these stories from the media, but there is no I would say well thought out research at this moment. No document has come out on this, that how these states have taken initiatives and how, what what innovative practices were followed. It's only through, because we are very much well connected to the states all over India. So we are getting reports that teaching through loudspeakers are happening. Children are made to sit in the open, or local teacher is he goes to village, to provide materials. All those stories are there, but those are not very well documented. So the challenge still remains. First, unequal access to digital learning portals, which your study is also revealing, lack of access to technology or good internet connectivity. And the second is where, there are no online infrastructure available, ensuring access of e-learning material to students located in geographically, hard to reach segments. That is also another challenge. NCERT was also struggling with same, problem, that how to reach out to children who are, in this sparse population or remote or rural remote area schools, school children. So, but also the fact remains that in most of the rural and remote rural areas, children have been out of school for almost 7 months now. And they are lost in the darkness of illiteracy, ignorance again, creating cumulative effects of learning gaps. But I'm happy that at least, Telangana and, Andhra Pradesh were still having their classes, because the other day I got a report from West UP that many of the villages, children are just, they do not know what is happening at the education front, because they are not even approached either by head teacher or by teachers. No one is taking any initiative there. So I'm sure there will be many million students who are just, pushed into that darkness of illiteracy again. So there are no official records also at this time. So all efforts in the past to bring a large section of them to schools have gone futile. Very sad to even, swallow this truth. So in this hour of crisis, we will only come to know that how many children have been affected by school closure all over and have not attended school, neither have they been exposed to any material after, the schools open. So in this hour of always say that the learning gaps, we do not know how will these be filled up in the years to come. Though there is a study which says that in one academic year, whatever is taught can be reduced to 3 months of teaching, serious teaching. But let's see that that cumulative effect, how much, can be, that gap can be filled up. That is again another challenge before all of us, in fact. Yeah. So while this school closure and discontinued learning poses challenges for disadvantaged, marginalized groups in different corners of India, at the same time, we can also say that, pandemic, school closure, COVID-19 has also, given us an opportunity to accelerate teaching, and more towards opening of a new chapter to face-to-face blended and online programs in the country, to which, Professor Dr. Renu Singh was also mentioning, that we need to have blended programs, online programs. So, of course, and face-to-face, because pandemic will not be there, always. So the dream which we all hold together, digital India. So let's, move together and, create that kind of impact somewhere. So today we need paradigm shifters and idea champions to envision what should work best in this post-pandemic era.
Dr. Rashmi, I think
exercise should begin. Yes.
Dr. Rashmi,
yes,
a couple of minutes, I think. Can we move on to the other speaker?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, therefore, I consider this study, at the right opportune time, and the field survey in secondary schools of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana adds to the value of this study. So given the circumstances in which this study was conducted, I found the findings quite revealing. The first one is about, the silent exclusion that happens, and also the low levels of learning. And the second is about, the wide spectrum covered by the study, right from support provided to children by the school to well-being of the parents and the learning support, to the children. So I will not go into other details, but also the third point I would like to say, that in the context of school feeding programs, where, 15 states all over India reported that they have not been providing this midday meal to the children, that will have more stronger impact. but when it comes to Telangana and Andhra, still, things are better out there. So on the whole, the report of the study and policy brief has the potential to provide rich evidence to look at the possibility of learning gain that must be considered as government plans for the way forward beyond this crisis. Thank you very much. And just one last point I would like to say, that the next phase of research, I think, if Young Lives India takes up on documenting these best practices in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, I think that would make, at least that will provide some silver lining in the years to come. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rashmi. Really, you brought out the issues very well, the discontinuity in the education, and then also, yes, let's take up documentation of these best practices that are there. As of now, we have some, and then very objectively we'll be documenting.
At one point, the title should be, not thank you.
So we move on from interrupted to uninterrupted. Yes. Yes, I think I'll now invite Terry to give his views on this.
Okay.
Over to you. Yes.
Thank you very much. And likewise, like to extend my congratulations to Young Lives for the study. I think it's very important to have these qualitative reports or assessments done and shared out in public domain. And it's interesting, it's really, it's in line with other information that's coming out, some of the rapid assessments we've done in terms of what's happening and what's not happening in the education sector. I think we've discussed a level of policy, and really what I've been asked to focus on is programming implications, but just saying that it's very important that policy and programming link, and that policies in place that reinforces the type of work that needs to happen at the states and at school levels, which is very critical. And we had this opening from Professor Senapati on NEP, which is very crucial, but also the guidelines that came out on the reopening of schools. But I think it's very important to look at some of the findings and the implications in terms of where do we go from here. Schools have been closed for 6+ months. Some grades, mainly secondaries, have reopened. A lot of the push behind this seems to be around exams. But it's interesting the fact that there seems to be no real move to open lower grades. And those are the children who can really benefit from schools reopening. But also there's a lot more challenges in terms of how you organize that in the current COVID context. I know a lot of states have developed reopening plans and guidelines. They have drafts in place, waiting for the national guidelines to come out. And I see communications from state colleagues that this is happening. But I think we need to catch up in a certain sense in India. I think the provision of remote learning came a bit late. I think people were hoping that everything will go away, but it didn't. But even within that, I think a lot's been happening in terms of programming. And I think one thing comes out is that there's not one size. The most successful things I'm seeing in terms of programming, it's really at the local levels, which is very important. And it's And I think there's a lot of discussions around digital divide, which is very real, very stark, and it really opens up who can access and who cannot. And I know there's discussion in NAP about this, but I think in the short term, digital will not be the solution. I'm not sure it'll be a solution in the long term. I think really the programming needs to focus on no tech or low tech solutions and getting learning to where children are. We need to adapt our approaches to go out to children. And we see examples of that happening in terms of, there's a lot of states have TV reaching out. Radio is not working as well as people thought it would work, generally speaking. People are not listening to radio, but people are looking on TV, but also looking at more traditional teachers going out, following up what's happening at the household. And I think we need to realize that currently remote learning it's holding off maybe a bit of the learning loss, but learning loss will be a real issue. The study comes out about students not having motivation, but I think people are forgetting who the students are, their children, adolescents. And I think people think back of their own children, or of your teachers, students in classrooms, and looking at how long attention spans are. And then the expectation that children are going to sit still without support for long periods of time, I'm not sure how realistic that is. And I think it's really looking at supporting more community-based initiatives around volunteers, peer-to-peer, in terms of supporting learning at the very local level over the next period, and probably even going beyond after schools reopen. Because we still don't know, once schools reopen, how fast parents will be in sending their children to school. We don't know that. I won't go into the health and safety around that, so I think people know that very well. But I think schools, districts need to have a very good outreach program to parents. And I think that's happening in ECE. Therefore, I think ECE or Anawatis are further ahead than lower grades in primary schools in terms of reaching out to parents, supporting parents to support children's learning. Learning through play. And it's not so much that parents helps children with homework and things, but it's giving children attention, listening to them. And I think these are, and look at more constructive ways or systematic ways this can happen. But at the same time, recognizing parents have other demands on themselves. I think an area of student dropout is a real, let's come up in study, is a real concern. We have the statistics in terms of how many children are now, who were in school, who are now not in school. A percentage of those are learning. But I think when schools reopen, I think a lot of programming will need to be done in terms of following up, working at panchayats or the SMCs, a community organization, to reach out and get children to come back to school. Because we know the longer children are out of school, the more difficult it will be for them to come back. Okay? School's becoming not a habit, not a focus. And this will be maybe more challenging, more for adolescents. One of the things are distracting them. other pressures, social pressures around boys in work, child labor, girls in the household, potentially early marriage. So since they're out of school, will that become? So these are things that programming needs to look at. So children don't start thinking, well, I'm not in school, so I might as well get married. I might as well work. So this is where programming needs to focus. I think it's a very important study to really identify who's not being targeted. As I mentioned, there's a lot of really great work happening at the state level. Various means of getting remote learning out. I think more needs to be done at the state level and the school level to know who is not being reached. I think there's in this study we get a glimpse of that, but I think it needs to be more systematic and seeing, okay, who are we not including and how do we include them? So going beyond recognizing, because I noticed that in the list from a study, who may not be benefiting or who may not come to school as a list. And it was interesting, I found all the groups very overlapping, weak, poor families, disabled children. And I think in terms of studies that we've done, students with disabilities are probably the most underserved. Nothing is really geared towards them. The remote learning is geared to the medium, be it online, digital, or low tech or no tech. It's not geared to students with disabilities who need special needs. So those are really being left out. I think there's an article in the paper talking about maybe 40% of children with disabilities will drop out as an area of programming. And I think the area around and girls probably needs more examination, because even I noticed that in this study it's seeing that girls and boys are quite close, and some of the assessments that UNICEF is supporting, it's quite similar, and we were surprised. So I think we need to have maybe, and again we see big stories about girls would be the big losers, but we need to see why data is not showing the same story. What is the truth around it? So so I think there's a lot of programming that needs to engage. I think there's policy initiatives going on, like the foundational literacy and numeracy missions, where all the states are setting up their committees, and really engagement with schools. We need to engage with these processes with reopening, so that when these quote unquote policies get rolled out, they're actually child focused and child centered. And coming back to the idea of learning loss, and I think Professor Rashmi mentioned about a special program. It's essential that when schools reopen, they have a special catch-up program, remedial program, for the first 3 to 6 months. The longer it is, the greater chances you are to reduce learning loss. And when children come back, teachers need to assess where are they in their learning, how much have they lost, where do I need to start teaching. I mean, these are, for me, a lot of good teaching practice, but it needs to be really programmatically rolled out, that these processes need to be in place if we're hoping to arrest. I don't know, turn back is possible. We're hoping, but definitely arrest and maybe recover ground around learning loss. Especially since we're almost through this school year. So I think those are really key programmatic implications that need to be addressed, that need to link to policy. Because I think the policy level needs to empower schools to take action based on the local context. And unfortunately, in India, there doesn't seem to be an empowerment to school head teachers to make decisions, be accountable, be responsible, and have the authority to take action to ensure that children within that attend his or her school are included in learning and are included in the school, and take proactive steps to reach out to communities to ensure that those children are in school and in learning. Because for me, those are very different things. We know, and start supporting parents at home in terms of better enabling that relationship. Because I think COVID is showing that there's an opportunity to, everyone's catchphrase now is reimagine education, but I think at the essence there's a strong truth in that it's shown maybe the different light, some of the cracks, and trying to patch the cracks so the neighbors don't see. But we need to look at how do we rebuild the wall a bit stronger to support a new system going forward, starting with the children and the school. So thank you very much. I look forward to the next steps of this study and looking at how these studies can education sector in India and how to inform practice, not simply policy, but actual actions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. I think you have really brought out the preparedness, what steps have to be taken. So much of programmatic preparedness needs to be done for us, all of us, to get back to the schooling. And then also it's very important that one size doesn't fit all. So more decentralized approach needs to be taken, and local stakeholders have to be taken into confidence and to arrange properly all the required things. I think both of the speakers have raised the issues of learning loss, the challenges that are there, and then how to be prepared, programmatic need for programmatic approach for the getting back to the school preparedness for school reopening, and then and also the inclusiveness, because already in normal circumstances the divide is so much, and in these circumstances I think it's even getting wider and deeper. So how to address all these and the challenge is there again. As a team, I think we would be possibly we will be doing more studies to get insight into some of these aspects. Thank you. And I think now the discussion is opened. Maybe the questions, how do we handle it? Dr. Renu?
So, I think Professor Revati, I will just read out a few questions to you.
Okay.
In the interest of time, I'll just read out a few. And so people have put up questions in our chat as well as in our Q&A, and I'm just reading out a few questions here.
Yeah, sure.
So Mr. Vijay Kumar has asked, is the data made available for researchers? Another question related to the study is by Dr. Sandhya Sanghi. She wants to know which level of students, primary, secondary, were basically targeted in this survey. One more question that we have related to the study comes from Neelima Chopra. She has asked, did any head teacher talk about any innovative ways of reaching out to students? If yes, what were these? There are a few more questions which I would like to read out. Would you like me to read out all of them together, or would you like the panelists to address these, ma'am, first?
Yeah, I think it would be better that these questions are addressed first.
Sure.
Dr. Renu, I think the level of school education,
So,
then yes.
certainly, I'd say thank you. So I think thank you for those questions. I think Nilima asked them and Vijay asked these questions. I think these were secondary school principals who we spoke to, and like I said, all of them have definitely upper primary and secondary classes. Some of them may also have had primary classes, not all. So some were composite schools and some were upper primary and secondary. So that was the level that they were addressing. In terms of will the data be available? Yes, Young Lives does put out all the data in the public domain, and for the first round of the telephone survey, which we conducted so we are doing 3 telephone surveys of capturing voices of young people. Our cohort, which we've done call 1, call 2 CES is just completed, and we are going to have the second headline report out in November. So first headline data is already out in the public domain. This is something that Young Lives always does. All the data we collect is put out there so that all of you can use it for the purposes that you wish to use it for. So please do watch out in the coming weeks for this data. This is just being done, so it will take data. We do double data cleaning, etc., before it's put into the public domain, and there are processes. And you'll find it and you can always ask us. The link is there on our website, and you can go into that link and you can download all the data from our previous 5 rounds of survey as well as the school survey data. So I think there was a question on whether we have got any good practices. So this is a survey. I think we would like, I think Professor Rashmi Devan also mentioned we should probably now be looking at doing a qualitative survey where we would get into details such as this, and be able to really look at capturing some of these very, very important findings from the field. And I read somebody's, I think it was Professor, who wrote, I think I saw somebody some time back, I'm sorry, I forget who wrote it, but somebody mentioned that we should be using a bottom-up approach. So I think absolutely to inform policy. I think, the fact that we cannot be looking at a top-down approach, we've got to look at what's working in certain contexts, learn from those extremely good innovations that must be happening. And maybe, I don't know, Professor Devan, maybe, School of Leadership, Center for School Leadership in NEPA can actually create a sort of a repository where you can actually ask people to send you some of these case studies from different states. We'd be happy to support you and help you in putting them and pulling them together. But, we could actually use that, because there is so much happening out there, and our colleagues who are on this webinar have much more, they have their finger on the pulse of what's happening in the field. I can see many of our colleagues there. So maybe we can think of ways of doing this better and doing it collaboratively.
Dr. Renu, we have already started this initiative 2 years ago, and we have provided platform to school heads all over the country to come up with their success stories. So this has happened for the first time because head teachers were not getting any this kind of platform anywhere. So we have been documenting. We are in the process, but good that at least if you support, and of course that will add to our strength as well. So maybe next time, this year also we have proposed, to the ministry about this for conducting this national conference. But I don't know in the given, the change circumstances, what will happen. But of course, we can always have live, platform created, and where, our school heads can come up with their own success stories. And of course, we would love to have you also with us, on the same platform. Thank you.
Okay, I think, Amita, we can move on to the next set of questions.
Sure, please. So we have two more questions related to the study. Preeti Mehra wants to know if there was any specific question asked on midday meals in the research. And Anthony wants to know that this is a survey about head teachers. Will you be doing the same for teachers and parents' perspective?
So I think, Anthony, you have to tell Airtel to fund us to do that. So yes, I mean, definitely, I think it would be very important to get those perspectives in at the moment, but there is no immediate plan at the currently. Yes, midday meal, Preeti, we did have. In fact, I may have not really focused on it, but yes, we did find that midday meal was being given in more than half the schools across the two states. Especially, I think Andhra Pradesh has had a very good program.
Dry ration. They have given the dry ration supplied to home. So to the children, especially at the package that they've given cereal and then the egg and then all these. So that has supplemented that.
So Andhra Pradesh did much better, in terms of addressing this. And I think this is a very, very important area because, not only do you have learning gaps, but the nutritional gap that, we do know the midday meal was also something that brought children together. I mean, and I just want to reiterate, it's not just learning, just not being with friends. I just can't imagine what children must be going through, not having enough play. I think we all are, as adults, are also finding it so difficult as we are coping with this continued sort of, restrictions on ourselves. But I do hear Shobita and others talk about the fact that in certain states like Rajasthan, for example, children are saying, "Bachche bas bhag rahe." Terry, they're saying children are just running around. Especially we heard some interviews in Rajasthan where we're doing some basic work, and they said, the boys are running around all day. Ladke to bas yahan wahan ghoomte hain, kuch pata hi nahi hota kya karna. They don't know what to do with themselves, so they just run around. And the girls, of course, are still more stuck to the home, but they're worried about child marriage and early marriage and, a whole lot of other social pressures and not being allowed to go back to school. So I think, there is so much to be, to worry about with school closure and continue, especially for the little ones. Because secondary schools, at least, their children are going back to school. They have other pressures, which is not easy for them either, because they have the exam pressure now. And I don't know how that's going to work out. But yes, one needs to worry about the little ones as well.
Can I move on to the next question?
Yes.
Okay, so Sri Nagesh has a couple of questions. I'm just reading out. He says that how far the satellite TV or online classes are reaching tribal children because they do not have Android phones. He also is asking us to suggest what are the priorities of resources required for school opening, especially since government and private schools are running in multi-storied buildings, how physical distancing is possible. He also wants to know if YL is planning for any preschool study.
I think about the satellite, I think I can clarify that. Satellite programs are being broadcasted on the Doordarshan and TV. Only children are seeing them through televisions. But of course, all schools do not have these televisions, and tribal children, anyway, they cannot access, and then they are unable to watch even these. So that way, I think they are completely cut off from accessing these schools, these lessons. Then
to come in. Terry might want to come in, I think, Professor Reddy.
yeah. Please unmute yourself.
Sorry, on which one?
So I think, Terry, there was a question on what do we do with buildings, many-storied building, multi-storied buildings, and school reopening.
I mean, that's part of the challenge, and I suspect why maybe some states are not so forthright in terms of the requirements under the ministry guidelines about social distancing, masks. I think there's a lot of innovation coming out where having some classes outside, shifts, or some classes learning at home one day, other classes are in school some days, or half the classes home, half the classes in school. It's really up to the state per se well, I don't know if the state is decentralizing that decision making, because it really comes up to a state by state approach. There's national guidelines, but they leave it up to states to adapt, which means the states they have sort of this decision of when, what, and how. But those would be my first options, at least for reopening, but also a lot of around the safety, wash facilities, hand washing needs to be there. If you have feeding programs, how is that done hygienically? There's lots of considerations around that as well that needs to be put in place, and protocols if someone's sick, because we know in Andhra Pradesh there were children who were sick that were in one of the secondary schools. Over.
I just want to answer the query raised by Nagesh about tribal schools. In fact, Nagesh, we even for our regular telephone survey that we're doing to get voices of young people, even there, because we had to often, they had to be called to come to a particular place to take the call where there was better signal. Sometimes signal is not there. So I think we need to probably also look at what is there in those communities. So is there a panchayat which can be given some sort of better communication means where children can come together, not in very large numbers, but within that building can they come if schools are far away? Because also it's also about distance to schools that children will have to travel. And we know upper primary schools are often not in the same location as the children are living, and so are secondary schools further away. So I think we have to take a whole lot of considerations into mind. I think, and there is so much we still need to learn. I don't think we have the answers yet. But I think we need to really reach out to people who are doing the work on the field to look at what's working. I think that's the main thing. We really need to focus on that, what works.
Yes, Amita, can we move on?
Yes. There are two questions related to student and teacher motivation. The question asks that, did the study look at the aspects of student and teacher motivation? And also, another question is asking how to keep teachers and students motivated in such difficult situations.
Maybe Professor Rashmi can answer this. The later question, I think. How to keep them motivated.
I'm not too sure, but from your study, I could see that your study is providing deeper insights into the personal attention, provided by the school head and teachers when they are not getting, like in your study also reveals that motivation levels are too low, but still they have been able to connect with the parents and with with the students. So I think that's the best possible way. to at least, create that kind of, rapport with them, so that they regain their motivation levels, which are too low at this moment. But of course, your study itself tells us that, yes, there is, the motivation levels. I will not say that because I have not gone deeper into that kind of aspect. But of course, because of that rapport that was created between head teachers, teachers, and parents, I think that connect was seen in your study somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just one point I wanted to raise here. One of the participants had asked about the tribal schools, that how are they managing, online. Recently, we had one program for Eklavya, model residential schools, but they have this infrastructure available, and we had participants from Andhra Pradesh as well and Telangana. So tribal, and these schools are specifically for tribal population in those areas. Yeah.
I just want to add, Professor Revti, that, the fact that teachers' salaries are not being paid, that would be a huge demotivator. I don't think we can skirt this issue. And I feel very strongly that, this is something that we've got to take up, where governments have to support. This is the time to support. We are hearing stories of, where certain doctors don't get paid, teachers are not getting paid. This is the time to actually handhold them and give them the capacity building, that they require and the support they require. So I think there is a big gap at the moment which really needs to be addressed. I know finances are at the moment a big question mark, but and I think the private schools, because they are not, a lot of them, I didn't show you some of that data, but there was also data of how many of them have not collected fees. So these are, just remember, these are not elite private schools. So many of them don't even have the backup to support them, and they don't know how they can function. And if they don't pay teachers, obviously, how can you talk of teacher motivation? This is human rights violation. I don't think this can be, and even deferral at what cost and for how long? I think those are things which need to be very clearly articulated.
Yeah, I think the deferred payments are now being paid in 4 months. But of course, yes, as you said, the private teachers are the most suffering lot. Especially the kind of schools that the low budget schools that are there, and then since they don't get fee, students are also not paying fee. That's the reason that's given by the schools. But of course, to get out of this situation is really governments have to step in, otherwise it's difficult. Yes, Amita, can we move on?
In the interest of time, I will just take one last question, I think.
Yeah, sure.
I'm just reading this last question for now.
Yes.
Do you think, so Preeti Mehra wants to know, that do you think midday meals should be made mandatory? It should reach students in whatever way possible, because the nutrition gap is as worrying as the learning gap. For instance, in Kerala, the meal reaches each one's home. So her question is, should midday meals be made mandatory?
Yes, yes to that. All of us will be yes to that. Yes. So I don't see that there will be any other answer to this. Yes, there are, because we have seen instances and we have seen the experience that midday meal really caters to the students, and not only that, to the nutritional support to the students also, and how that has been during this pandemic. I think we have listened to some of these stories from the media itself, that children are foregoing one meal actually. So they may have only one in the morning and in the evening, but the main meal is being skipped, and then that's a huge, I think, nutritional gap is there, which also impacts the learning gap. So I think we have to all search how this reaches to the students, to all the students, and these policy measures, I think we need to really work out on this.
Yes. Because
So,
a large section of students have been pushed into extreme hunger,
yes,
and undernourishment also.
undernourished.
So that is the studies which are showing, they are revealing the recent studies on
Yes.
COVID itself. So that's
Yes.
something to be taken seriously, as a policy guideline from the government. It should come. Yeah.
Yeah. First, I think these basic things, money should go for these basic things. That should be the thrust of the government and policy. So, shall we end this? Yeah, I think this was a really good discussion, stimulating discussion, and how I think from the field, though this was a phone survey, and we also thought that there was a limited information that we could get. But still, it was perceptible that some of the results are really come out well, and we know the challenges that are there, and the problems that are being faced, the divides that are being created, and of course, it also is that what to do. So what are the initiatives that are being taken at different levels? I think that's a good idea that we collect all that, and how also it's very important also to see that it's the top-down approach doesn't work in these situations, at least, because the situations are so diverse and so different that tackling them with some kind of course, the overall guidelines could be there, but within the ambit of the overall guidelines, what actually have to is really the local kind of or decentralized kind of decisions that have to be taken. So I think thank you all panelists for joining this, and Dr. Renu Singh, and thanks all who have joined this discussion. I think there were 60 participants in the beginning of the program, and thanks, so many questions were raised, and there was an interesting discussion that has going on, and as promised, maybe Young Lives would come up with more insightful kind of studies that are there, which would throw light more on the challenges. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Professor Revati.
Yeah.
There are some questions and comments which we've not been able to address. I request the participants to please send us the messages, and we will be very happy to respond to all questions and comments. Other than that, we've also shared the link of the report in the chat here. So I think some of the comments and questions related to the study may also be answered once you read the report. But please do reach out to us for any further questions which we've not been able to address in this session. I now call upon Dr. Renu Singh to kindly deliver the vote of thanks.
Just 1 second.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank all our participants who've been, I wish we could have had, we need a half a day to get to hear your voices, I think, but thank you for sending in your written comments and questions. I hope we've been able to at least address some of them, but I think we are just opening and unraveling the questions at this stage. I don't know whether we have all the answers, but at least let's start the dialogues. Let's start looking at where are we going, what should we be doing, what are the concerns that have to be overcome and the barriers that need to be addressed. I think this is just the beginning. I hope we'll have many more conversations going forward. And it's not just learning gaps and nutritional gaps, but I think I really worry about mental health of young people. The Young Lives survey that we did showed young people are under great and immense stress. So, I mean, I think that our first round showed that, and the second round we've done deeper to understand what is it. But yes, we have found that there is definitely loss of livelihoods and as well as hunger that many of them are actually witnessing. So thank you all for being with us, and I'd like to especially thank the Young Lives team, Saltanat, Amita, Shriparna, all of them working behind the scenes to make this happen and to have us all together. And thank you, panelists, Professor Diwan, Terry, Professor Revati, thank you, and of course, Professor Senapati, who's left us. But thank you all so much for taking out time from your very busy schedules and joining us. I hope we can have lots more engaging conversations going forward. We have lots of work to do.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Renuji. Thanks for the invite. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Good afternoon.
All the very best and stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you.
You too.